On December 13, 2000, one of the most shocking prison escapes in American history took place inside the John B. Connally Unit, a maximum security prison near Kennedy, Texas. By the end of that day, 7 convicted criminals had escaped from what many believed was a secure prison. The event would soon become known across the country as the Texas 7. Their escape embarrassed prison officials, triggered one of the largest manhunts in Texas history, and led to a series of violent crimes that would leave several innocent people dead. But this was not a sudden decision made overnight. The escape had been carefully planned for months. Each member of the group had different criminal backgrounds. Some had been convicted of murder. Others had committed armed robbery, kidnapping, or violent assaults.
Yeah, but look
Together,
here.
they formed a
Rotation
team
is
that
still at
believed
3.
they had nothing left to lose. The 7 escapees were George Rivas, Randy Halpern, Joseph Garcia, Larry Harper, Donald Newberry, Michael Rodriguez, Patrick Murphy. Although they came from different backgrounds, they shared one goal: freedom. The Connally Unit was considered a secure prison, but like many correctional facilities, daily routines created opportunities. The prisoners carefully watched the movements of officers, maintenance workers, and civilian employees. Instead of using violence immediately, they studied the prison's schedule. They learned who carried keys. They learned which storage rooms were less protected. They learned which areas had fewer guards. Most importantly, they learned how patience could become their greatest weapon. For weeks, they quietly built trust with prison staff by following rules and avoiding unnecessary attention. Nothing about their behavior suggested that one of the biggest prison escapes in Texas history was about to happen. Then came December 13th. The group put their plan into action. One by one, they overpowered civilian maintenance supervisors and prison employees working inside the facility. The victims were tied up, handcuffed, and locked inside a maintenance room. As more employees entered the area during the day, they too were captured without raising an alarm. The escapees stole prison uniforms, radios, identification cards, and keys. Disguised as workers, they moved through different parts of the prison with surprising confidence. Because they appeared to belong there, few people questioned them. The deception worked better than anyone expected. Eventually, the group reached the prison's outer areas. Using stolen equipment and official-looking vehicles, they drove through security checkpoints. By the time prison officials realized something was wrong, the 7 men were already gone. The alarm was finally raised. Officers rushed to search the prison. Locked rooms were opened. The tied-up employees were found alive but shaken. A head count quickly confirmed the worst. 7 dangerous inmates had escaped. News spread rapidly across Texas, then across the entire United States. Law enforcement agencies immediately launched an enormous search. Roadblocks appeared on highways. Helicopters searched forests and open fields. The FBI joined state and local authorities. Television stations interrupted regular programming with breaking news. The public was warned that the escaped prisoners were extremely dangerous and should never be approached. Many people expected the fugitives to separate and disappear. But investigators would soon discover something surprising. The 7 men stayed together. And that decision would make them even more dangerous. Within days, they began stealing vehicles, gathering money, and preparing for life on the run. Authorities feared they would commit more crimes. Sadly, those fears would soon become reality. The escape that had already shocked America was about to turn into something far worse. A crime that would leave an entire community mourning, and place every member of the Texas 7 at the center of one of the most intense manhunts the United States had ever seen. The prison escape was over. Now the real challenge began. 7 escaped prisoners were free, but staying free would require money, transportation, weapons, and places to hide. Every police officer in Texas was looking for them. Their faces were on television, newspapers, and wanted posters across the country. Most fugitives split up after escaping prison. The Texas 7 did the opposite. They stayed together. Investigators believe the group thought they had a better chance of surviving if they worked as a team. Each man had different skills. Some had experience with weapons. Others knew how to steal vehicles or avoid police attention. Together, they believed they could outsmart law enforcement. In the days after their escape, they stole several vehicles to avoid being tracked. They changed license plates and moved frequently. They also stole clothing so they would not look like escaped prisoners. Money quickly became a problem. Without cash, they could not buy food, rent motel rooms, or travel long distances. The group needed a way to finance their life on the run. That decision would change everything. As Christmas approached, shopping centers across Texas were crowded. Stores were busy, parking lots were full, and armored trucks were making regular cash deliveries. One business caught the fugitives' attention. an Oshman sporting goods store in Irving, Texas. The store sold sporting equipment, clothing, and outdoor gear. More importantly, it handled large amounts of cash during the holiday season. According to investigators, the escapees carefully planned another crime. This would not be a random robbery. It was organized. On December 24, 2000, Christmas Eve, the 7 men arrived at the store wearing disguises. Some wore fake security uniforms to make themselves appear less suspicious. Witnesses later told investigators that the men acted calmly as they entered. Inside the store, employees and customers suddenly found themselves facing armed robbers. The group quickly took control. Workers were forced to the ground. Some were tied up with zip ties. Others were threatened with firearms. The robbers demanded money and valuable merchandise while keeping everyone under control. Although the robbery happened quickly, it was terrifying for everyone inside. Then something unexpected happened. As the robbery was taking place, Irving Police Officer Aubrey Hawkins responded after noticing suspicious activity. Officer Hawkins was only 29 years old. He had been serving his community and had a young family waiting for him at home on Christmas Eve. As he approached the scene, he had no way of knowing he was confronting 7 escaped prisoners from a maximum security prison. Investigators later determined that multiple members of the Texas 7 opened fire. Officer Hawkins was shot numerous times. Despite wearing body armor, his injuries were fatal. The 7 men stole his police vehicle and fled the area. The murder shocked Texas. What had started as a prison escape had now become the killing of a police officer. The crime transformed the investigation overnight. Every available law enforcement agency intensified the search. The FBI added the fugitives to its major investigations. Rewards for information increased dramatically. Television networks interrupted holiday programming with updates. Pictures of the 7 escapees appeared repeatedly on national news. People across America were warned not to approach them under any circumstances. The murder of Officer Hawkins deeply affected the Irving community. Hundreds of fellow officers attended memorial services. Residents left flowers, flags, and handwritten messages honoring his sacrifice. For investigators, the mission had become even more urgent. This was no longer only about finding escaped prisoners. It was about capturing 7 armed men who had shown they were willing to kill to avoid going back to prison. Meanwhile, the fugitives continued moving from place to place. They abandoned stolen vehicles, changed their appearance, and tried to stay out of sight. Investigators believe they relied on cash, avoided drawing attention, and used false identities whenever possible. But living as fugitives came with constant pressure. Every stranger could recognize them. Every traffic stop could expose them. Every news broadcast reminded the public that the Texas 7 were still free. Even though they had escaped one of Texas's most secure prisons, staying hidden would prove far more difficult. As days turned into weeks, investigators began collecting new leads. Small mistakes, witness sightings, tips from ordinary citizens. Piece by piece, the enormous manhunt started closing in. The Texas 7 still believed they were in control. But they had no idea that hundreds of investigators across multiple states were slowly building the trail that would eventually lead straight to them. The hunt was entering its most critical stage, and the fugitives' time on the run was beginning to run out. By the beginning of 2001, the Texas 7 had become some of the most wanted fugitives in America. Their faces were everywhere. They appeared on television news every day. Their photographs were printed in newspapers across the country. Law enforcement agencies distributed wanted posters to police departments, businesses, and communities from coast to coast. The reward for information leading to their capture continued to grow, encouraging people to report anything suspicious. The FBI, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the Texas Rangers, the U.S. Marshals Service, and hundreds of local police departments worked together on the investigation. It became one of the largest manhunts in Texas history. Investigators carefully retraced every known movement of the escapees. They examined stolen vehicles. They interviewed witnesses. They reviewed surveillance footage. They followed every phone call, financial lead, and anonymous tip that came in. Most of the information turned out to be false. People reported seeing the fugitives in different states almost every day. Some believed they had crossed into Mexico. Others thought they had disappeared into the mountains. Each report had to be investigated even when it led nowhere. Meanwhile, the fugitives were trying to build new lives under false identities. After leaving Texas, the group eventually made its way to Colorado. They settled near Woodland Park, a small mountain town west of Colorado Springs. The location seemed like a good hiding place. The area was quieter than the cities they had left behind. Tourists came and went. Cabins could be rented without attracting much attention. The men tried to blend into the local community. According to investigators, they used fake names and changed their appearances. Some grew beards. Others changed their hairstyles. They wore ordinary clothes and tried to avoid drawing attention. To neighbors, they appeared to be a group of friends sharing a trailer while looking for work. But keeping 7 fugitives hidden was becoming increasingly difficult. They needed food. They needed supplies. They needed money. Every trip into town created another chance for someone to recognize them. At the same time, investigators never stopped searching. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On January 21, 2001, an episode of the television program America's Most Wanted featured the Texas 7. The show recreated the prison escape, explained the murder of Officer Aubrey Hawkins, and displayed clear photographs of each fugitive. Millions of Americans watched the broadcast. One viewer recognized the men. A woman in Colorado noticed that several people living near her looked remarkably similar to the fugitives shown on television. She contacted authorities. Investigators treated the tip seriously. They quickly compared the information with other evidence they had gathered. Everything pointed to the same place: the trailer park outside Woodland Park. Rather than rushing in immediately, law enforcement carefully planned the operation. They knew the fugitives were heavily armed. They also knew these men had already killed a police officer. A careless move could put officers and innocent civilians in danger. The FBI, local police, and tactical teams quietly surrounded the area. Roads were secured. Nearby residents were protected. Negotiators prepared for what could become a dangerous standoff. Inside the trailer, the fugitives had no idea just how close law enforcement had come. The freedom they had fought so hard to gain was slipping away. For more than a month, they had managed to stay one step ahead of investigators. Now, after weeks of searching, a single phone call from an alert citizen had changed everything. As officers closed in, the escapees faced a decision. Would they surrender peacefully? Or would they fight to the very end? Within hours, that question would be answered. The confrontation in Colorado would bring one chapter of the Texas 7 story to an end, but not without tragedy. And for one member of the group, the escape that began with hope would end in a way no one could have predicted. On January 22, 2001, law enforcement officers surrounded the trailer where the Texas 7 were hiding near Woodland Park, Colorado. Weeks of searching had finally led investigators to the fugitives. The operation had been planned with great care. Officers knew they were dealing with 7 dangerous men who had already escaped from a maximum security prison and had been linked to the murder of Irving Police Officer Aubrey Hawkins. They expected that the fugitives might resist arrest. The area around the trailer was secured. Nearby residents were told to stay inside their homes. Heavily armed tactical teams took up positions around the property while negotiators prepared to make contact. Their goal was clear: bring the situation to a peaceful end if possible. Using loudspeakers and other communication methods, officers ordered the men inside the trailer to surrender. The fugitives quickly realized there was no easy way out. The trailer was surrounded. Escape routes had been cut off. There would be no second prison break. For several tense hours, negotiators continued talking with the men inside. Law enforcement wanted to avoid another tragedy. Eventually, 6 members of the Texas 7 agreed to surrender. One by one they came out of the trailer. They were taken into custody without gunfire or injuries to the officers. It was a major victory for investigators. After more than a month on the run, 6 of America's most wanted fugitives had finally been captured alive. But one member of the group made a different choice. Larry Harper refused to surrender. Instead of walking out with the others, Harper remained inside the trailer. As negotiations continued, officers hoped he would eventually give himself up. That never happened. Before officers entered the trailer, Harper died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. His death brought a dramatic end to the manhunt but also reminded investigators of how desperate the situation had become. With the arrests complete, authorities searched the trailer. Inside they found weapons, cash, disguises, false identification, and other evidence connected to the group's time on the run. The investigation also helped authorities better understand how the fugitives had managed to stay hidden for more than a month. The capture of the Texas 7 made headlines across the United States. Many people praised the teamwork between federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. Investigators also recognized the importance of the public. Without the tip from a citizen who recognized the fugitives after watching America's Most Wanted, the search might have lasted much longer. The case became a powerful example of how public awareness can help solve major criminal investigations. For the families affected by the crimes, however, the arrests could not erase the pain. Officer Aubrey Hawkins had lost his life while serving his community on Christmas Eve. His family, fellow officers, and the people of Irving continued to mourn his death. The capture of the fugitives brought justice a step closer, but it could not bring him back. Meanwhile, prosecutors in Texas began preparing for a series of trials. The charges against the surviving members of the Texas Seven were extensive. They included escape from prison, armed robbery, and capital murder for the death of Officer Hawkins. Because Texas law allows participants in certain violent felonies to be held responsible for a death that occurs during the crime, even if they were not the person who fired the fatal shot, all surviving members faced the most serious charges. The legal battles would continue for years. Each defendant had the right to a trial, legal representation, and appeals. Some accepted responsibility for parts of what had happened. Others challenged aspects of the prosecution's case. But one fact was no longer in dispute. The escape that had begun with careful planning and deception had ended in failure. The 7 men who believed they could outrun one of the largest manhunts in American history were no longer free. Yet the final chapter of this story was still to come. The courtrooms would now decide their futures. And the legacy of the Texas Seven would leave a lasting impact on prison security, law enforcement, and the criminal justice system across the United States. The capture of the Texas Seven marked the end of one of the most infamous prison escapes in American history. But for many people, the story did not truly end with the arrests. The legal process was only beginning. The surviving members of the Texas Seven were returned to Texas to stand trial. Prosecutors presented evidence showing how the group had carefully planned the escape, committed armed robbery while on the run, and participated in the events that led to the death of Irving Police Officer Aubrey Hawkins. Under Texas law, all of the surviving members could be held responsible for Officer Hawkins' death because it occurred during the commission of a violent felony. Even if one individual fired the fatal shots, the group shared legal responsibility for the crime. Over the following years, the courts handed down their decisions. Several members of the Texas Seven received death sentences. Others received life sentences or additional prison terms based on the crimes for which they had been convicted. The appeals process lasted for many years, as is common in capital cases. Some convictions and sentences remained the subject of lengthy legal reviews before becoming final. Meanwhile, the memory of Officer Aubrey Hawkins remained strong. Every Christmas Eve, many people remembered the young police officer who lost his life while protecting his community. He was only 29 years old. He left behind a wife, a young son, family members, friends, and fellow officers who continued to honor his service and sacrifice. His name became a symbol of courage and dedication. For the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the escape became a turning point. Officials reviewed how 7 inmates had managed to overpower employees, steal equipment, and leave a maximum security prison without immediate detection. The investigation revealed weaknesses in prison procedures. As a result, many security practices were strengthened. Correctional facilities increased staff training, improved employee safety procedures, enhanced key and tool control, and reviewed inmate work assignments to reduce the risk of another coordinated escape. The case also demonstrated the importance of cooperation between agencies. The FBI, Texas Rangers, U.S. Marshals Service, local police departments, and correctional officials worked together throughout the investigation. Their combined efforts, along with information provided by members of the public, ultimately brought the fugitives to justice. One lesson stood out above all others. No matter how carefully a criminal plans an escape, remaining free is often much harder than escaping in the first place. The Texas Seven believed they had created the perfect plan. They studied routines. They gained the trust of prison staff. They disguised themselves. They stole vehicles. They crossed state lines. For a short time, it seemed as though they had succeeded. But every crime they committed created new evidence. Every witness they left behind gave investigators another clue. Every day they remained on the run increased the chances that someone would recognize them. In the end, it was not an advanced surveillance system or a dramatic chase that brought the manhunt to a close. It was an ordinary citizen who saw familiar faces on America's Most Wanted and chose to make a phone call. That single decision helped law enforcement locate some of the most wanted fugitives in the United States. More than 2 decades later, the Texas Seven case is still studied by law enforcement agencies, prison officials, and criminal justice experts. It serves as a reminder of both the dangers posed by organized prison escapes and the importance of constant vigilance inside correctional facilities. It also reminds us of the heavy cost of violence. Behind every headline are real people whose lives are forever changed. Families who lose loved ones, officers who risk their lives every day, and communities left searching for answers. The story of the Texas 7 is not one of clever criminals who achieved lasting freedom. It is a story of poor choices, escalating violence, and consequences that followed every decision they made. Their escape shocked America. Their crimes horrified the nation. Their capture demonstrated what determined law enforcement and an alert public can accomplish when they work together. And that is why, even today, the Texas 7 remains one of the most notorious prison escape cases in American history.